It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I was here about 12 years ago, and come back again. And we'll be seeing few pictures that we project in a few minutes about most of what I did as photographer in all my life long. In reality, the presentation here in Boston will be split in two parts. One will be this one that we'll be doing here tonight. In the most recent part of my work, that is Genesis Project, I'll be presenting in the 5th of May in the Yes, in the Museum of Fine Arts. And well, it's interesting. People, if it was possible to come to see the other, you have an idea of a whole body of work that I did all my life long. I believe that you are enough smart to understand what I understand now, with 69 years old. I probably did the first body of work would be Genesis, starting from Genesis. That was normal, start from there. But took me all this life long, 60 years, to understand how to, if I represent my work as a circle, Genesis was the completion of this circle, was completely in this. No? But always, I want to tell a little bit of my life that I believe that would be easy to understand the kind of photography that we did. Because photographies that will be shown, I'll be showing here, sometimes people can interpret it as very hard, tough photography in a sense, with a beautiful world, a beautiful lights, people with a lot of dignity, and but very sometimes difficult for the people that are here in this very protected society, very rich society of the north of the planet. But what I want to tell to you that these pictures represented the big majority of the population of this planet. The most important part of the humans live like these pictures that I'll be showing here tonight. And same here in the society, that sometimes we live downtown Boston, nice areas, and we don't pay attention that in the periphery of these big towns in the United States, the life sometimes not easy also. And I believe that this is the most important point, that we can see this picture as a reflection what our life, but not on our American protected life, is the life of all our planet, of our human beings, that we are part of this just one tribe. Well, I want to tell you that I'm born in Brazil. When I born in 1944 in Brazil, Brazil were not yet a market economy. I born in a farm, and I lived in this farm until that I had 15 years old. And I must tell you that I grew up in a kind of paradise, real paradise. It was a big cattle farm, with more than half of this farm was covered yet with rainforest, with incredible birds, incredible animals, a lot of water. And we had a lot of cattle, it was a cattle farm, but I was in freedom in this huge amount of land. I use light in a certain way in my photography. I'm 100% sure that the light that I use in my photography came from there. Before the rain season in these areas, it's so incredible, the light. It's so beautiful. We have incredible clouds, light across the middle of all this. It's a very really area in Brazil. We have the idea of these mountains, one inside the other, and we have the idea of this infinite land. When I was a child, I learned to travel a lot, because when the cattle was ready to go to the slaughterhouse, We were in horses for about 45 days traveling to bring the cattle there. And to come back was a little bit more fast, put about 20 days, 25 days to come back. That means we are traveling for more than 2 months in the road. And probably this gave the base for what I did in all my life long. After that was a little bit bigger, I had finished the first part of my secondary school. We have my small village, my small town, just beside the first part of secondary school. I migrated to a more big town called Vitória in the seaside. And there, for the first time, I saw the poverty. I saw the radicalization. I learned politics. Was the moment where Brazil started to be not more a rural country, started to have a kind of accelerated urbanization. When I born, Brazil has more than 92% of rural population. And today, 50 years later, Brazil has 92% of urban population. What, for example, European countries put 400 years to become a urban country, we put 50 years. That means I live inside an incredible social process, very accelerated process, and radicalization, politics, creation of working class, creation of industry, and coming from a country that was not, as I said, in a market economy, become a semi-industrial country, a developing country, and today looking to become a developed country also. But you imagine that had the privilege, in the sense, to live in a moment like this, you receive a lot from a society like this. And going to this town, Vitória, I become an activist in politics, a young activist in politics. I made my university. I found my wife, Lelia, that we live together now for about 50 years. Next year will be 50 years that we are together. And we migrated together from Vitória to São Paulo, where I made a master's degree in economy. And there, linked with the leftist movement in Brazil, fight against dictatorship, in a moment was necessary to us, or go to the clandestinity, had a weapon in the hands, fight against dictatorship, or go out of Brazil. As we were very young, I was, say, not 25 years old, Lelia, 20 years old, less, and organization that were part, we take a decision that was better to us to go to a foreign country, and because it was a moment of huge repression in Brazil, a lot of torture, and we gone to France. And we spent in France about 11 years not coming back to Brazil. We lose our passports, there was big fights with dictatorship in Brazil, all these things. And in Paris, I did the preparation for a PhD in economics. And I went to work in one international organization. In this moment, I discovered photography. Lelia was doing a architecture school in France. She bought a camera to do photographies of architecture. And I had a big chance in this moment to discover photography. I never had made one picture in my life long. And I saw for the first time the world through a camera, through a lens, and something changed inside me. But I went to work as an economist in an international coffee organization and doing missions to Africa with the World Bank. When I came back to London, where I live in London this moment, the photography gave me 10 times more pleasure than the economic reports that was necessary to prepare for the project that I was working. In a moment, we take a decision together that I will abandon economy and become a photographer. And it was this, 1973, we came back to Paris, I became a photographer, and I tried many times to do any kind of photography, to do sports, to do landscapes, to do nudes, to do. And one day, I don't know why, I was completely inside social photography. Of course, come from where I come from, doing the studies that I did, social photography was the most normal thing inside my life. And many people tell that I were an activist photographer, that were a photojournalist, that was an anthropologist photographer. I was nothing of this. Photography was my life, much more than anything of this. It was my life. What I believe that was interesting to go because made me happy or made me angry, or I went to photograph, organize in a way, we organized in a way, because we did all together all our life long with Lesley. And I went to photograph. And basically the work that I did in my life, I work in bodies of work. I very few times in my life I did some photography here, some photography there. I did bodies of work. I started doing a work in Latin America. We are refugees in France, no way to go back to Brazil. And I started to work in the countries in periphery of Brazil, Uruguay, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador. And when we finished this big repression in Brazil in the 80s, was supposed to me to come back to Brazil, include Brazil, and after I came to Mexico, to Guatemala. And this first body of work we call Other Americas, and Lesley designed the first book. It's Lesley that designed all my books, all the she's great of all the shows, and I did my first body of work. And I were an economist, and was supposed to me to see that a lot of productive part of the planet was changing with the arrival of the computers in the line of productions, with the intelligent machines, and with the robots. The first big industrial revolution was finishing. And as I were an economist, as I were an activist close to the working class, we create a project called Workers. We want to try to do a kind of homage to the working class all over the world. And I gone for about 5 years, did a lot of work, and more than 25, 30 different counts. And that became a book called Workers, with shows that we show all over the world, a lot are here in the United States. We have this book published here by Aperture, and we published this book in many different counts. Doing this body of work, I was possible to see with this new, huge industrial revolution, the human family start to recompose in a completely different way. Counts as the mine, that was agricultural counts, become huge industrial counts, huge migration, going to this polos of production. China, India was the same. And we create a project called Migrations. And I went for about 7 years to photograph this all over the world. That became a book also. And more recently, we created this body of work called Genesis. In reality, everything that I did in all my life long was this kind of stories that were completely integrated to them, linking to them. It's this sample of this work that I'll be showing here. We'll be seeing few pictures from this first part of the work that I call Other Americas. After we have a group of pictures of the workers, part of pictures of the books that I did in Africa, and part of migration. Will be about 120, 140 pictures. I'm not very sure how many pictures, but it's about this, about 22 minutes. We have a very nice music for the one contemporary composer called Henryk Gorek. He's from Poland. And it's his third symphony that will be here together with these musics. And after, we go for a small discussion together. Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Christopher James. I'm director of the graduate program at the Art Institute of Boston. And thank you very much for coming. Sebastião, your work is absolutely beyond comprehension. It's so beautiful. Thank you. What I'd like to do tonight is first ask Sebastião a question, and then he would like to entertain some of yours, and we'll go till around 8:30 or so. Thank you. I'm beyond more words than that. It's stunning. I first met you 30 years ago when you and Bruce Davidson and I went swimming in Fontvieille, France. And I had no idea that I'd be sitting here with you 30 years later in awe. But I am. There's evidence in your work that it's not enough for the photograph itself to show that there is a problem. But there must be evidence as well that there is a solution within that photograph. In a conversation with you last night, you indicated that in order to be effective, it was necessary for you to penetrate the circle of your subjects, to integrate yourself within their lives, to participate in that integration. And that would ensure that your life and the lives of your subjects and the life of your pictures over time would come together to create effective change, especially in the context of the institutions that use them. My question to you is that over time, as the years go by, are you aware of how your images change due to time and also due to context?
Apologize, but I don't understand very well the question.
Have your images that you made 30 years ago changed meaning for you over time and in the context that those images are seen? In other words, the glorified atmosphere of a museum, for instance, versus that of a newspaper page.
No, don't change nothing for me. In reality, you first do this image because you must do. Is my language of photography, and I was photographing something that was deeply concerned with. And the first reason that I went was just because of this, because it was necessary to go. And I put myself, I put all my time, and these photographies are my life. And I cannot say that a moment in my life was more important than the other. And these photographies, they were used for many humanitarian organizations. They were published in newspapers. They finish in museums. We have collectors that have them. But when you photograph them, you photograph because you must photograph. And that is this. And after, where they go, if people see them and they are made to see, they accomplish the trajectory. And I accomplished my life. I have 69 years old. I have about 40 years that I'm doing these pictures. And in the end, this is my way of life. These photographies are my way of life. And when you do one very rational analysis, you can put in an explanation for anything. But the real explanation for this, that everything that I was concerned with then, I went to see, and I photographed with my most deep sincerity, with my ideology, with my ethics. In reality, I try to have, or I had, one kind of coherence, line of life. And these photographies are.
Thank you. Would someone like to ask a question? Yes.
How do you get the trust of the people that you get so physically close to?
You know, this kind of photographies, you can do only if you are really motivated to be there. You cannot go spend 5 years doing one store. As the workers, I spent 5 years doing work. Migration, I spent 7 years doing these pictures of migration. And I spend months and months with people that I live with them. And I remember I did a body of work, that few pictures were there, in Africa with Doctor Without Borders. I became a doctor out of board. I don't went to a school of medicine. But in this moment it was possible to me to get thing in my ears, put in the pulmonary for children, knew the children had a TB or not. No? If it was possible to me to give basic medicines, was possible. I was part of this organization, I live with them, I travel with them. We have these pictures that raise funds for this organization. I was part of UNICEF and part of UNICEF till today because I'm a goodwill ambassador of UNICEF. And with World Health Organization. And when I went inside these refugee camps, when I inside these communities, when I displaced with a group of people, I was living with them. That was my life. These guys were my friends. That you see, you cannot go to do these pictures, just go there to get nice shots. You go there because it's your life. It's where you'll be. And in this moment, you are very close to everyone. In the moment, it's not say more you that take your pictures. It's the people that are in front of you that give the pictures of you. I was sometimes in a so desperate situation that people came to ask me to photograph them. They came in front of my camera, but they were coming in front of a microphone, asking me to speak, to transmit the situation for the other to understand what was going on. And you see, it's living in a part of the planet like here that's very protected society, and it's quite different from these people that live in the other part of the world. And but these are the big majority of the planet. You see, in the pictures that I want to do there, that I did and I showed the other side, this was a link between many things. And that is important, that in this case, you are inside the real life of people. You are inside the real situation. I went sometimes with a group of refugees coming by walking from the north of Ethiopia for weeks and weeks, walking with them, leaving the road and get to, and you see, it's because I had a camera in the hand that I was taking photography. But if I had another thing, I was doing another thing. That means I was part of a movement. And these pictures is part of movement of our history for me. Many of the books that I didn't know, for example, Migration, we did with a very good friend of ours that was a very good printer in Switzerland. And the books at that time were expensive. We did the books. Aperture published this book in the United States. But it's Leila that designed the book. It's Leila that was real publisher of the book. She did the book and she gave Aperture to publish in the United States. She gave Pantheon to publish in England, other publishers in France. But the problem that because the relation of the change, the Swiss franc becomes so expensive, so high, that we cannot more print the books in Switzerland. And, but the guy that printed this book for us is so big friend of us that we cannot endure him to take in these negatives from his printing house to go to print in Hong Kong or the more cheaply place, because he'll be so unhappy if you do this, that we did the book sail out, finished, and we'll never more he print this book, because except if he gives back us the negatives that in this moment we can reprint. We have a lot of publishers that ask for the book, but we don't have more of this book. My first book, that was Other Americas, we did so few books. I published with a publisher house here in the United States that was called Pantheon Books. And Pantheon Books finished after a long time. And we not more reprinted this book. This book exists on in collection list. It was very funny because for this book, we received for the United States copyright $2,500. And today I saw one of these books sold by $8,000 in the list of collectors, one book. That's funny when you see this thing. But this book don't exist more also. And Workers, yes, Aperture, that was the first publisher of the book that made distribution around the world. They took out the negatives from Switzerland that they print in Hong Kong, and the book exists here. But other books not. And that's it is.
And this video?
Video? No. This, don't. You know, it's the first time that we do a video like this, that you use this new technology to do this thing. Because before, I did this projection, but with 4 projectors. We have 4 projectors running. It was real as dancing rock and roll to project these pictures. Now we have a video, but we do not do this, because you know what happens. We are a very small group. It's Leila that coordinates the group. We are about 8 persons that work together. And I have other works to do. I was just finished a Genesis that take me 8 years to photograph, 2 years to organize before. Lelia's designed the books and the shows after 1.5 years. When you put all this together, that takes all our time. You have no more time to go to the old work in order that print, because we are not really a commercial business thing, no? And these pictures, they exist like they are here. We show them sometimes. The people that has the book, they have the book, and that's it.
Yes.
2 things really quick. One, you have an amazing printer in Paris. All your photographs are printed just wonderful. And the other question is, when you are in situations that things seems to be really hard, where that it seems like there's no hope, what is the hope that is in your heart that keeps you going?
You know, you go, you take your pictures, you live your life, and few moments you are so proud to be part of human species, because things are so incredible. When I did, for example, Workers, see a human being capable to take the coal mine, come from inside the hard mine, difficult to get, this mineral, no? By itself that means nothing. And seeing another mine, guys take out iron ore, and all this come together to a steel plant that becomes steel, flat steel, become this flat. So go to a shipyard, they link all this together. At the beginning you don't understand, what's this? The guy said that will be a ship. They said, oh my God, how that will flotate on a flat steel, this thing. And one day that started to get a different shape, and one day become real a boat. And you see this floating, and this go all over this planet transporting everything that we do, that we produce, no? And one day the ships have no more function, go to Bangladesh, they cut this, and they transform the ship in everything that the ship transported all his life long, in instruments, in everything that we use, you know? When you are part of this, you see we are an incredible animal, capable to transform, to produce, to create incredible innovation, all this. And this moment you are, for many years, you are incredible, you are flying, you are, same if the work is hard, but there is a lot of nobility. You see a lot of injustice inside the work. When you go to the guys working in agriculture, or a few pictures here, work from the morning to the evening, producing goods, and they work as hard as anyone that works in this town. But the moment to sell the products, their products have no price in the market. They go for international market. Who fix the price is not the guys down there in Africa, in Latin America, it's the guys here in Chicago, in London, in these trade markets. And these guys finished doing nothing. In reality, they export their products at negative price because they don't receive money to buy health, to buy education for their kids, to buy a house, no? And the ones in this side accumulate, become so rich, capable to do planes that cost each one $250 million, one fighter plane, completely equipped, going, do aggression everywhere, wars, all these things. And this is the money of all the planet. When you see these things, sometimes you are not happy, you are unhappy, you are part of this, all this system. And sometimes you go to do stores, like I did to do migration stores, that you finish in so dramatic situations, so accumulation of negative aspects, so many brutality, so many violence, that you start to die together. Your body starts to die, you start to die, you lose the trust, you don't believe more, no? But you are part of all this. You receive the influence of all these things, you know, all life long, because it's the life that's like this. I work with a language that is the photography that represents this cross-section of the society that we live, no? And you have these motivations. I'm a part of this society also. I work for the information. I have my pictures in the press. And I work with this humanitarian organization that use all this. You are part of a system. And, but I tell you, a few months in my life was very tough. I remember when I was finished to photograph Genesis, what I saw in ex-Yugoslavia, what I saw in Rwanda, was so violent, so tough, that in a moment I start to die. My body started to die. I went to see a doctor and said, Sebastian, stop. Stop, because you are not sick, you are dying. You see so many deaths, so many desperation. I was 100% sure that our species will be finishing. We are a programmed species that have no right to live. No. In a few months, you believe in another way, go in another way. And that is the thing. But always, it's a big privilege to be a photographer. It's unique that you have right to see what is fabulous, what is not fabulous. You see real, what is our real society. You know, how all us behave, what animal you are, what incredible, what terrible we are at the same time. You know? And this is incredible. That is. I cannot say my life was positive, was negative, was nothing. My life was the movement of the life.
Did those experiences urge you to do Genesis? To having seen so much death, to want to see so much life, or the potential for it?
In a sense, yes, because in a moment it was so tough that I stopped. I stopped, and we went back to Brazil, where I born, where I grew, for this kind of paradise. When we were there was not more the paradise. All was destroyed, all, because to build this incredible society that we have, we destroy our planet. we destroy all of our forests. All this region here, New York, Boston, all this was covered of incredible forests. We have nothing else more. You know, other day, I was flying now in February from Atlanta to LA, looking from the window of the plane. We create an incredible desert in this country. I was photographed for Genesis in Colorado Plateau. And Colorado Plateau is a disaster, a destruction in all levels. You know? And to build this, we destroy incredibly. And when we went back to the farm that I grew, that was a kind of incredible paradise, all was destroyed also. And the farm that has more than 50% of rainforest, when we get this farm, was less than 0.5% of rainforest. All was destroyed. No, in 50 years, all was shut down. All our region, all our things. And in this moment, we start a rebuilding of this land. Leila had one idea, said, Sebastian, you tell me always that to grow in the paradise. But here's the hell. And I said, why don't he planted the rainforest that was here? And we prepare, we put few years preparing, we work on this project, and we start to replant the rainforest. And see this rainforest grow. The life came back inside us again. And I had a big wish to go to photograph in this moment, to photograph the planet in another way. And include inside the question that was important for us, include also the environment. And Genesis in the end is a kind of cross-section what we have yet pristine in this planet. But this, we'll be speaking in 10 days about this in the, when I come back here to do the next speech in 5th of May.
Thank you. Another?
I know almost nothing about photography, but as I was watching the images, what I thought I saw is that a common technical motif in these pictures is that the subject matter close to the lens is clean and crisp and high resolution. The subject matter far from the lens, trees, clouds, mountains, is very grainy. And the resolution is degraded in a sense. If I were standing by you as you took your photographs, the photoreceptors in my eye would be able to see those trees and mountains much more crisply than the image that is pretty here. Why have you chosen to make the subject matter far from the lens so green?
Do you know, I work all my life long with one film, a film made by Kodak called Strauch-Mosse. It's a press film, a fast film, a film very easy to photograph with because of high-speed film. And I never worked with a tripod, it was all by hand. And to ensure to have a sharper picture, it was necessary to photograph in a high speed. And this film allowed me to do this. But what was negative, was bad in this film, that more high-speed film is, more grainy is the film. And this film creates a texture that is what, how we call texture in English? Pattern, one, something that, you see, that is a bad technical point. When you see pictures, for example, of Ansel Adams that work with very low-speed film, were big format cameras. My negatives was 35mm negatives. My negatives were big like this to have this picture in this huge. In this moment, the grain opens and you have this effect of the grain of the film. This all made with all the films. And if you come for the next projection that we'll be doing, the technical quality will be much better because I use medium format camera, negative much bigger, and will be less grainy than this. The definition is because the lenses were very good. I work always, all my life long, with Leicas, German lens that were very sharp. And today, they are more sharp yet, because when you use the prints made in an enlarger, the quality was much more poor than now. And now with the digitalization of a negative, you digitalize everything. Everything that's sharp is sharp. Before we had the center sharp and the edge a little bit more sharp, that were not that sharp because the lens, they get the rounded center, perfect, and the border more or less. And now we change this, that is quite sharp. If I made this same projection 10 years before with these 4 projectors, with much less sharper than now. Now it's sharp. That's what looks as a texture is the problem of the film. That is the technical problem.
Thank you. Another?
Yeah.
Yes?
How often did you run into opposition from the authorities in the different countries that you looked at?
He wants to know how many times you've been arrested.
Few times. No, of course that we have a problem. And, but that is a good thing to work with small camera. And you see, 2-3 Leicas, you put inside a small bag, and you can go, you can mix with people, you can, no problem. Now for Genesis I had an assistant because I was working with cameras much more heavy. I was doing a subject that sometimes was dangerous, was necessary to rappel, with climb and do things. So I was photograph nature in very special conditions. But before I work alone, it was necessary for me to carry all my cameras and all my films for months. And in this case, I was very mobile. I crossed a lot of security with no problem at all. In few times, I were arrested. I had to push me out of the councils, and this kind of thing happens a few times. But that's like this, no? That is your life. You see, when we stay a long time in a protected area like this, we are afraid to go. But when you go every time, that is your life, no? To go. And in reality, it's funny, you know, take some risk and be in the edge of the things, and yeah, this is the life is sometimes is but I photographed many risky situations, but I was there for a period of time. Same if it was longer as 2-3 months. That was just 2-3 months, and sometimes the guys were there for years inside of the fighting areas. But one thing I must tell to you, for me, the real intelligence of our species is the capacity of adaptation that we have. If you go for very dangerous situation, the first month you are scared, just after more or less, and after a few days, you are completely inside. You take the risk as the normal behavior. And I believe that this is the point. I remember that I saw in ex-former Yugoslavia, once we were in a village, the Serbs start to fight against the Croats. They would start to fight. They were living together for tens of years. In a month, the split of inside the not the ethnic, because all these Yugoslavs, they were the same ethnic. They were slaves of the South, all them. But as they were influenced by different political currents, for example, the Muslims were part of the Ottoman Empire that finished there inside. The Serbs were part of the Russian Empire that was finished inside the former Yugoslavia. The Croats, they were part of the Austro-Hungarian Imperium that finished there inside. They were speaking the same language, writing this language in a different way, and in this sense they become kind of enemies. But for many years they lived together inside what we call Yugoslavia. And when they start to split, to have a fight, who was firing you is your neighbor in front of your house. And the things become dangerous in a sense. But the kids was necessary to go to school. I remember we're in a village when the fights was starting. The mother was desperate because the kids were going to school inside fighters. Now fight going here, but first day they do not went, second day was necessary to go, they gone, guy was firing and kids was going, and it was a terrible situation. I came in the same village. A few months later, was just normal. They were firing yet, it was the same danger, but the city said, bye, I'm going, middle of the firing, going to the school and come back. Completely adapted. It's the same for when you are working. The first days is not easy, and after become your way of life also. You are completely adapted, you are completely inside. I remember once, I went to north of Ethiopia, doing a story with Doctors Without Borders. One book that we publish here is called Sahel, The End of a Road, was published by the Lesley University here in the United States. And I went there for a few days, for 2 weeks. Médecins Sans Frontières gave me a 4-wheel drive car, a Land Cruiser, and I went inside. And during the evening, we used the road that during the day, with the guerrilla movement, I went inside with them, north of Ethiopia, and during the day, the government used the same road. And one day, when I was inside, the government took the road, was impossible to come out. And the guys of the guerrilla movement said, Sebastian, you go by camel, it'll take you about 40, 50 days, and we stay with the car. One day we bring the car back. I said, no way, guys, because this car will cost me $50,000. That was the price of the car at that time. And I have not that money to pay the Médecins Sans Frontières. I stay with the car. And I stayed there for a while with these guys, eating nothing, living with them, under the bombing of the government of Ethiopia, because they have a lot of MiGs, they were bombing all the time, they have all these things. And in the beginning, I was really scared by many things. In the end, was my life. And I tell you, the day that I walked out of that, they took the road that was supposed to come out with the car, I was very ashamed to come out. That became real my life. Was completely adapted to that. You know.
We'll take one more question, please. Yes.
2 more questions. You and him that's trying long. That's not all right. Okay.
You work on very global and broad topics. How do you approach your projects, and how do you select places where to go and to illustrate that you want to show?
Do you know, first, this project, the thing that I work because I was completely identified with them. You cannot, as I said a few minutes ago, go to a 5 years photography, 7 years photography, 8 years photography, if you don't have a total identification with the subject that you are inside. It must be real, your life. You have a pleasure, comfort to be there. In this moment, you are inside a story, completely inside a story. And we start to have relation and contact with people linked to this story. Photographers, journalists, institutions. You are part of institutions also, you are linked to institutions. In this moment, you are part of this story. You know it as the lines of your hand, no? And you know where to go, who contact, what is the next step. You can, you sometimes, when you start a store like this, you created the guidelines of the store, and you let the store evaluate, and you are inside, and we go link to them. You made a projection to do a lot of different shoots in a few years, but many of the shoots you don't do more because the things change, and you change together, you adapt, and we go. Okay. Now.
When you actually are making the photograph after you've gone through this whole process and you become part of what you photograph and the people trust you, it seems to me that it's virtually effortless for you. That when you're actually making the pictures, is it effortless for you once you get yourself in that situation and in that mindset?
Is this all easy for you all the time?
What is what?
Making images. Just
Easy.
going.
The actual moment.
The moment of making images.
The picture, of seeing the picture. Tell me what that feels like for you.
Well, yeah, we speak here basically all time about the motivations, about the reason to be there, about ideology, about all this. But we must say that I'm a photographer. I have a huge pleasure to photograph. I love to be inside the moment that I'll be having. Same in the situations deeply dramatic, same in the situations very dangerous, same in the situations very beautiful. You must be inside your language. You are there to photograph. You are a photographer. You must be getting an incredible identification with the things happening. You are part of the thing, and you are totally integrated to that. And in this moment, you have your image, and it's this. No, this integration that's the most important. Many times, I do not photograph because it was too hard. Many times, I do not photograph because I never made one picture if it was not to give back the dignity to the person that was there inside. And many times it was necessary to add people to this moment you don't photograph, but majority of the time you are there to photograph and you photograph.
Thank you very much.